Our next talk will be given by Swami Atmarupananda, Take Refuge in Me.
Thank you, Mataji, and again, greetings to everyone. Welcome back after lunch or supper or breakfast or whatever, or snack, whatever you had, depending on where in the world you are. So let me, as usual, begin with a chant. Om Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langhayate Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Vande Paramananda Madhavam. Our salutations to Madhava, Krishna, the Sweet One, by whose grace the mute are made eloquent and the lame are enabled to cross over mountains. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat. Om peace, peace, peace be unto us all. So, as Rajika Brahmaprana said, the topic now for me is Take Refuge in Me, the words of Sri Krishna in the 18th chapter of the Gita, sort of his final words to Arjuna. So the topic is about surrender, a very large topic, a beautiful topic, and at times a difficult topic. Swami Turiyananda, the disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, used to say that surrender is the last word in spiritual life. And yet there are those teachers who tell us that the essence of spiritual life is surrendering to the divine. And they're right, it's correct. But actual surrender is happens at the heights of spiritual life. And so there's surrender as practice and there's surrender in actuality. But let me back up from that right now and say that it's helpful for us to remember that surrender is completely natural to us. It's like the fact that renunciation, this big, long, scary word, renunciation, which we read about in Vedanta, we are practicing renunciation every day, all of us, including those who have no idea of spiritual life whatsoever. Renunciation is a scary term because we think it means giving up things that I actually want and which I naturally want, but Vedanta says I shouldn't have. No. Renunciation is something all of us are practicing. In Vedanta, it's just doing it consciously in a particular direction. Detachment is another big, scary word to many. But detachment, all of us, everyone in the world, even animals, are practicing detachment every moment. It's part of the way that we live. It's necessary for a normal, natural life. Renunciation, detachment, they are part of life itself. In order to lead a normal life, we have to practice both all of the time. I won't go into them because that would take us from the subject. I've dealt with that in other talks. But let me take up another, and that is faith. We think faith, oh, it's so difficult to get faith. I don't have any faith. I wish I had faith, but I don't have any faith. Everyone has faith and is practicing faith every moment. You wouldn't be here without faith. You wouldn't be able to breathe without faith. You wouldn't get up in the morning without faith. You get up in the morning with the faith that the world is an ordered place and will continue to be an ordered place where I can carry out my necessary activities. You have the faith that the air will be there to breathe. You have the faith that the earth will support you. Sometimes that's belied, especially for those of you living in California or Japan or other areas that are seismically active, Iceland even more. But by and large, even if we're in seismically active places, we, for the most part, believe that the earth will support us. We believe that friends will be friendly. We believe that the forces of government will protect us if we're in a stable country. Not everyone is, but they will have other faiths. So we're practicing faith all of the time. In religion, when we come to religion, faith is just a special exercise of something we already have. And religion actually is learning what I should really have faith in and what I should have no faith in. That's all religion is. Learning that things where I put my faith, they don't deserve my faith. And where I had not thought to put my faith, that's where my faith belongs. And so it's just learning to redirect my faith and redirect my lack of faith. So it's a natural phenomenon: renunciation, detachment, faith. And I could go on with other spiritual qualities and qualities of character and dynamics that we are asked to develop in spiritual life. They're all quite natural: concentration, etc. So all of them are just, in spiritual life, there's a special use for these natural functions. And so it's very much the same with surrender. When we go to a movie and watch a movie, nowadays people don't go to movies so much. There's Netflix and Amazon, Hulu, Disney, etc., streaming services. But when you watch a movie, however you watch it, at a theater or in your home, what do? If you really want to enjoy the movie, you surrender yourself to the movie. You suspend your disbelief, which means surrendering yourself to the story of the movie, surrendering yourself to the storytellers, to the actors, so that you suspend your disbelief and allow the story to carry you forward. If you're sitting there the whole time in the movie saying, I don't believe this is unreal, this is just a movie, this is stupid, can you enjoy a movie that way? No. You enjoy a movie when you surrender yourself to it. When you listen to music, do you most enjoy music when you're sitting there thinking and analyzing, and well, how did they do this? How did they put that together? What instrument is that? How are they blowing on the oboe? How are they moving the bow on the strings of the stringed instruments, etc.? No. You enjoy music most when you surrender to it. You relax into the music and let the music carry you away. When you love someone, a human being, whether it's romantic love or friendly love or parental love, whatever, when you love someone, you are most in love with the person when you surrender to the love that you have. When you're not fighting it, when you're not analyzing it, etc., but you surrender to the love. So surrender is something that we are practicing all of the time. And our happiest moments are moments when we are surrendered. All of us have, if we think about it, some of you may not have thought about it, but you would certainly find, if you did think, that some of the happiest moments of your life were when you were in a state of surrender. One of my two moments that come to me from my childhood, one, my very earliest memory, earliest of all memories, and it's rare to have a memory this early. I was only 2 years old, still in diapers. I had been taken with my parents had taken me and my older brother to Daytona Beach in Florida from our home in Atlanta, Georgia. And so I don't remember all of that, but I remember very clearly, and it's something I still think about and still use for meditation sometimes. I remember my mother holding my right hand, her friend Virginia Baxter holding my left hand, and I, still in my diapers, waddling out into the ocean. And it was the first time I had seen the ocean. And I looked out, and this vast, vast expanse, endless expanse. And there was a feeling of such wonderful peace and surrender and joy and freedom. All of the worries of the world, even for a little kid, were gone. It was just the feeling of the vast expanse where I felt completely surrendered to the vastness. It's a wonderful meditation for me because of the intensity of that feeling. I still can call up from my 2-year-old mind. Another memory much later, when I was about 9 years old, I was walking home from school one spring day. It was the first day of spring, which comes early in upstate South Carolina, where I was living then. But the first day of spring that the people had started cutting their grass. So I was walking home from school about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It was a bright sunny day, crisp blue sky. The beginning warmth of spring was in the air, and the smell of fresh cut grass was everywhere. And so I stopped in front of a house, the owners of which I didn't know. It was several blocks from my own home, and just lay on the grassy hill in front of their house that came down to the sidewalk and just stared up into the blue sky. And that also one of the memories of my life when there was a feeling of complete freedom, complete peace, complete expansion. A wonderful feeling of surrender to the spaciousness of the blue sky. There was nothing else to think about, and nothing to worry about. Just that expansiveness. And so surrender is something that we practice all of the time. And if we think about it, most of us, and I would guess that all of us, would find that our very happiest moments were in moments of complete self-forgetful surrender. We surrender every night when we go to sleep. You can't try to go to sleep. All of us have been in that miserable situation where you're trying to go to sleep, you're grasping the pillow and trying to, come on, I want to sleep, and you can't relax. That's horrible. When you finally do fall asleep, it's because you finally let go and relaxed and fell into sleep. And so surrender is not falling asleep, but surrender is like that, in that surrender is relaxing the hold we have on things and on life and on our limited existence. Just as we relax into music, as we relax into a movie, as we relax into love for a loved one. So that is surrender, which we are all familiar with. We have the mistaken notion, especially in modern times, when we have become a consumer society. Even America was not always a consumer society. Before the 20th century, America was not a consumer society. In fact, when our president told us after 9/11 that everyone should go out and shop and show the terrorists that they have not defeated us, 100 years earlier, that would have been an insult to the American public, to equate our freedom with consumerism. But now we consider that freedom means the freedom to choose whatever I want. I'm free because I can go into the grocery store and choose among 100 different brands of breakfast cereal. That's my freedom. I'm free because I can go to Home Depot and buy whatever tool I want of all kinds of brands and so forth. That's my freedom to be able to choose things. But I think about it. That is a type of social freedom, and that is important because it's by making informed choices that we grow. So I'm not diminishing the importance of that, but we shouldn't for a moment think that that is real freedom. I experienced many times when shopping and making all of the choices that we have to make in order to shop and reading labels to make sure it doesn't have something in it that I don't want and so forth. I finally get up to the checkout counter, and then the cashier says, "Would you like that in plastic or paper, sir?" And I think, oh my God, not another choice. Just put it in something and let me get out of here. Making choices is not freedom. It's important. And having the ability to make choices is important at our present level of existence. But thank God that there is a higher level of existence where we don't have to do that. That is actually work. That's not freedom. That's work. When you think of those moments of complete peace, when you've surrendered yourself to beautiful music, surrendered yourself to a wonderful movie, when you've surrendered yourself to a book, when you've surrendered yourself to the vast blue sky, surrendered yourself to the vastness of the ocean, You compare that to going to a grocery store and making all sorts of choices. What comparison is there? So surrender, we need to learn where freedom is. Freedom, real freedom, and I want to say freedom from a Vedantic standpoint. And it's true, freedom from a Vedantic standpoint, but that's not the important thing. Freedom from a real standpoint, from an experiential standpoint. Freedom means the freedom from any necessity, the freedom from any impulsion, the freedom from any compulsion, the freedom from any need, the freedom from anything acting on me, or the very possibility that anything could act on me, the freedom from anything being able to impel me, compel me, push me, activate me, whatever. That is true freedom. We have trouble understanding that now because, again, we think that my freedom means doing whatever I want to do. And again, that has its place at our ordinary level of evolution. But thank God we can transcend that level because that's no freedom at all. That is just a type of work and a type of compulsion and a type of necessity, which is the opposite of freedom. And so freedom is found in surrender. We think of surrender because the terms are tied together in English and in many other languages. I'm sure not in all, but in many languages, it's tied to the act of giving up to an enemy. We surrender because our forces have lost. And so surrender is what you do when you've lost and you're defeated and you have no other choice, and now you're going to be made a slave. No, get that association out of your mind altogether. Surrender is like the surrender to beauty, the surrender to love, the surrender to freedom, the surrender to vastness, to spaciousness, the surrender to that which you really are. So complete surrender, as Swami Atmarupananda said, that is the last word in spiritual life. But it is also a practice. If we understand that renunciation is something that we're all doing every moment of every day, and religious renunciation is just a special application of that. If we understand that faith is something we're exercising every moment of every day, we wouldn't be able to do anything without faith in ourselves and the universe, etc. The faith is something, then when we come to religion, we find that, well, faith is just exercising in a different direction something I already do. And then if I understand that surrender is something that I'm already doing, but religious surrender means a more complete act of surrender to that which I don't yet see or feel. Eventually I will see and feel, not see with these eyes, but see with the inner consciousness. Then surrender, we see that surrender means surrendering into beauty, surrendering into love, surrendering into complete freedom, utter freedom, surrendering into infinite existence. That's what surrender means, not I'm defeated, so I give up and I'm going to live in slavery to God or to somebody else. No, freedom means that. So let me say just a word about free will and predestination, because surrender, we begin to practice surrender in spiritual life because we understand eventually that everything happens by the will of God. And so then there was a question earlier today to me about free will, and maybe it was yesterday, I forget, I think it was this morning, about free will. And that's a natural question. One of the great questions in all religious systems is about free will or predestination. Is everything predetermined or is there free will? That's really not such a problem. From one standpoint, from a scientific standpoint, from an analytical standpoint, we see that there cannot really be free will. The idea of free will is that I'm a free agent. I can do what I want to within certain limits, yes, but within certain limits that are described by the law and by society, I can do what I want to. But if we look from the standpoint of modern psychology, physiology, scientific causation, etc., we find that when I make a choice for something, I make that choice because a whole number of factors have come together and have determined what choice I'm going to make. As I give the example I always give is you hand me a choice between chocolate and vanilla ice cream. And if you know all of my whole past, my present and everything, you know that I'm going to choose chocolate. On another day, you know that I'm going to choose vanilla because I've had chocolate so many times that I need a change. But you can see that those are not free choices. I'm choosing because right now I want chocolate. And I want chocolate not because I'm completely free and there's nothing impelling me. It's because all of these factors inside of me are impelling me to choose chocolate. So my choice isn't free. And so in that way, all of the things, if you could see everything going on within the mind of another, and only a Ramakrishna can do that, but he could do it, then you would see that each of their choices, all of their actions are motivated by a whole web of causal factors which are impelling them in that direction. So free will is a misnomer. The will is not free. The will is tied to so many factors. And yet, we feel ourselves free every moment. We feel that we are free, and it's in that freedom that we act. All of our acts, we can't act without that sense of freedom. So the will is not free, and yet we have this sense of freedom. Swami Vivekananda explains that that sense of freedom is an intuition of our real nature. It's an intuition of the fact that we are free. We are absolutely free right here and right now, but it's not the will that is free. It's actually that we have this intuition of our forgotten freedom, which is not lost, just forgotten, which is infinitely free, our nature which can be affected by nothing, like the screen and the example Swami Sarvapriyananda has been beautifully giving, like this movie screen, which is unaffected by the movies shown on it. So we are unaffected by the world, and yet we think, because of our identification, that what happens to this body and mind are happening to me. And so that intuition of freedom is there. But because it's that intuition of freedom also which has an extraordinarily important part to play in our present life, because if we didn't have the sense of freedom, we would be machines. We would be acting as machines. And so the problem right now for us is if we try to live in the sense that I have no free will, is that we start to act like machines, but we're not machines. We know that we are free. It's just that that sense of freedom is misplaced. And so right now, if I say, well, I'm not free to do anything, so I can't do anything, then I lose the ability and the motivation to act. And so right now we act out of a sense of freedom. We have to. We have no other choice right now. But if I understand that ultimately freedom is not in the will, not in the ability to choose, but freedom is my own nature, then I begin to look for that freedom elsewhere. I still, when choices come to me, I still have to make a choice, as though I were free, because I don't even know what's impelling me forward, and so I have to make a choice. So I do that in my normal transactional way, but I know that freedom is not there. That actually is work, and I'm being impelled to one side or another. So I begin to try to seek my freedom in God or in the self. And so in surrender, I try to surrender to the self, that is, surrender my identity. I am the infinite. I am pure consciousness. I'm not the body and mind. Or for most of us, it is much easier to surrender to God, because again, God is that same reality from the standpoint of the universe. When there is a universe, and when we see ourselves within a universe, no matter what our philosophical position, there is God. And God is that infinite reality, but that infinite reality engages with us as God. And so surrender to God is much easier for most of us, because there we can more easily conceive of an all-loving God. Not that it's a conception, it's a reality, but it's easier for us to think in those terms. And so, but whether we do it to the surrender to the self or whether we surrender to God, Ramana Maharshi, who was a great non-dualist, who emphasized self-knowledge, jnana yoga, the path of knowledge. He also emphasized, even in his teaching of jnana, he emphasized surrendering to the will of God. So for a jnani, God is not dead, God is not non-existent. God is that reality when we are perceiving a universe. So we can't, at present, if we think that everything happens by the will of God, we misunderstand the truth of that, because we're seeing it from our standpoint. We're seeing it from the standpoint of a person who understands that I do things, and so God must be doing more things than I do. And I make choices, so God is making choices. And so if God's will runs everything, then God must be telling this person to sit down, that person stand up, this person to speak, that person to be quiet. He's making the electricity work over here, and he's blowing out transformers over there, and things like that. No, we've completely misunderstood the nature of God. God isn't a busybody. As Sri Krishna says, he's in the fourth chapter, he says, I am the one who has created the divisions of society, and yet I have done nothing. And over again he says that everything, I am the doer of everything, and yet I do nothing. So the idea of God as God's will as directing the universe, that we only understand as we begin to rise to a higher level of perception. Then we see that, yes, everything happens by the will of God. And so then I can begin more effectively to surrender to God, because I begin to see that, yes, everything is happening of itself by the very presence of God. Here there are two ways, and I don't want to make it complicated because I have to bring all of this together in just a moment because my time is running out. But there are two ways. One is to see that everything here is happening by the gunas of Prakriti, which is the way that a jnani who doesn't like God talk does it. The problem with that is it's sort of a mechanistic way, because Prakriti is just objectivity, and it's just sort of mechanical. But to see everything as God's will, that brings consciousness into everything. And that is closer to the reality. That's why Sri Ramakrishna said, the child's view is more correct than the adult's view when the child sees personality everywhere. He speaks of Hriday, his nephew's son, the little boy of 4 years old, running through the courtyard of the Kali temple, going to as leaves were being blown by the wind. The kid was running after them saying, shh, be quiet, as if the leaves could hear him. Sri Ramakrishna spoke approvingly of that, because the idea that everything is happening by God's will it fills all of this with consciousness, and that is closer to the truth. It is happening by God's will, and God is consciousness itself. God is pure consciousness in relationship to us. That's what personhood is. Personhood is consciousness in relationship to another consciousness. And so we surrender to that. So now let me try to tie things together. Surrender as a practice means that, how do I do that? I begin by thinking that whatever I do, I don't know what God's will is. I don't know what God wants. I have to make a choice. I can't wait till God writes me a letter or calls me on the telephone and tells me or sends me a text. I have to act now, make a decision now. So let me think in everything that I do, Mother, may I do this according to your will. If this is not your will, you redirect me. And after I do it, if I find that your will was otherwise, let me have the strength to change course on a dime if I see that it's your will. Let everything that I do be according to your will. So I make that my prayer, my regular prayer. And by praying in that way, when I do something, when I face a choice, it gradually becomes a part of my thinking. Gradually, I find through doing that over and over that bleeds into the rest of my life. and everything that I do, I begin to think, Mother, is this your will? Mother, you please guide me. I don't know what to do. I'm just your dumb little child. You direct me. You tell me what to do. You show me what to do. Should I do this or should I do that? I don't know. You see, the sense of freedom that a child has when they have surrendered to their mother. Of course, a child doesn't have to surrender to its mother. It's born with surrender to its mother. It has to learn how to separate itself from its mother. But learning to surrender, it doesn't have to do. I remember when I was 4 years old, sitting at the table, and my mother had fixed French toast for breakfast. And so I was still, I might have been 5 years old. I was probably 5 by that time. And so we're sitting at the table, my father, my mother, me, my older brother, my little sister in a high chair. And so I was sitting there with the stack of French toast on my plate. And my mother asked me, do you want me to cut it for you? And I had never cut my French toast myself. She would always cut it into squares. So I just had to put my fork in and eat it. And I said, yes, Mama, I want you to do it. And my father said, boy, why are you troubling your mother? You're old enough to do that yourself. He gave me a scolding. And I was so hurt. My father was a good man. He wasn't rough or abusive or anything. But I was so hurt as a kid that Mama asked if she wanted to do it. And yes, I want her to do it. Well, why should I do it? I want Mama to do it because that showed her love and everything. And why would I want to do it? So you see that, again, that surrender. Why do I want to do things for myself? Surrender is freedom. That's a greater experience of freedom than I am going to do this by myself. I don't want anybody's help. You get out of my way. No, Mother will do it for me. I saw with the great disciples of Holy Mother that they had that sense of surrender, and the wonderful quality all of them had that I knew many of them. And those that I knew well enough and could see enough of them, I saw that they all had this sense that Mother will take care of everything. Mother will take care of everything. They had no sense of worry, even though they lived sometimes in difficult situations, but no, Mother will take care. So that is surrender. So let me bring it now to the Gita. All great teachers have given the promise of refuge to those who take refuge in them. The Buddha taught his disciples to take refuge in the Buddham Sharanam Gacchami, Dharmam Sharanam Gacchami, Sangham Sharanam Gacchami. I take refuge in the Buddha, in his teaching, and in his community. Jesus said, come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Such a beautiful statement, such a beautiful statement that Jesus makes. Come unto me, all ye who that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Such beautiful and hopeful words. That is surrender. That's what we are surrendering to, whether in the form of Jesus or Krishna or Allah or Ramakrishna. And again, I could give other examples, but time is up. So let me come to Sri Krishna. Sri Krishna says in verse 66 of chapter 18, Sarva dharman parityajya mam ekam sharanam vraja. Aham tva sarva papebhyo mokshayishyami ma shuchaha. So sarva dharman parityajya, giving up all other concerns, giving up all concerns, and giving up all other possible refuges, other things that are your comfort zones, giving up all other sources of refuge, all other ideas, all other projects, giving all of that up. Take refuge in me alone. I will lift you above all sin, papa, or demerit, or wrongdoing, whatever, however you translated. Having lifted you beyond all sin, I will liberate you. Don't worry. Don't mashucha. Don't worry. I will liberate you, having freed you from all bondage. So take, having given up all other sources of refuge, all other thoughts, all other paths, all other concerns, take refuge in me alone. This is Sri Krishna's promise. This is Jesus's promise. This is Sri Rama's promise. This is Ramakrishna's promise, who said, those who take my name, I will come for them at least at the end. If if they work hard enough, I will come during their lifetime to them, reveal myself during their lifetime. But at least those who are devoted to me, I will come to them at the time of their death. That was his promise, a promise reaffirmed by Holy Mother. So Sri Krishna gave that same promise to Arjuna, and through Arjuna, he gave it to us. Arjuna is the symbol of each one of us. He's the stand-in for each one of us. So Sri Krishna gives us that. Sri Ramakrishna gives us that. Jesus gives us that. So when we surrender, that is the highest attainment in spiritual life, to surrender to reality. The jnani experiences that as surrender because the ego, the individual personality, which is practicing self-inquiry, which is discriminating, which is doing studies, Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana, and other practices in Vedanta, that can't attain to the infinite. We are the infinite, but we're ego-bound. And so even the jnani experiences that the attainment of the infinite comes from the other side. That's why it doesn't come from the side of the ego. It comes from the other side, the side of reality, where that floods and washes bondage and the ego away. That's why the Katha Upanishad says that that it's the self that chooses the one who attains to the self. And for the devotee, certainly it's experienced as the grace of God, because the ego can't attain to that. The ego can only do the preliminary work, but the revelation comes from the other side. And so surrender is surrender to reality and into freedom, where there's no necessity, no impulsion, no compulsion, nothing that can possibly act upon us, nothing that can push us, nothing that can frighten us, nothing that can threaten us, into infinite and unalloyed freedom, which is bliss. So I'll stop for questions now.
Swami, that your topic beautifully explained that everything is God's will, but then how do we apply that to our prayer life? For example, if someone we know near and dear is ill or is dying, or they need money, do we pray for earthly things, for health, welfare, and that, or do we pray in a different way so that it is God's will?
Oh, good question. And that's a real problem for all of us at some point in our lives. And so let me give a layered answer. That in general, praying for ourselves or for others, always leave it open for God's will. That is, so-and-so is sick. My child is sick. My mother is sick. If it's your will, please give them comfort. Please, if it's your will, may they get well. But at least give them the strength and the comfort so that they can that they can face that which they have to face. And if it's in your will, please bring healing to them. So always, you can certainly pray for a positive result, but leave it open to God's will. You don't have to just say, well, it's all God's will, so I'll just leave it to God and forget about it. No, especially if it's someone that you love very much. How could a mother be told, don't pray for the healing for your child? No, certainly the mother will heal for that. But even the mother, the mother can't be given that understanding at that moment when she is worried about a sick child. But the mother can learn at other moments when the child is fine, that whatever happens, it happens by God's will. And so even the mother who has informed herself of these ideas, when a child is sick, certainly she's going to pray for the healing of her child, but she can also know in the back of her mind that, yes, it's in your hands, oh God, but please, if you can, please heal my child. There's nothing wrong with that kind of prayer. Prayer about things Don't pray for a particular outcome with things like, I want a car, I want a new car, so give me a new car. No, you can ask for guidance. You can say that I don't know, my job requires a car. I need to get a car. I don't have the money. I don't know how to manage this. Please give me guidance. That you can always do. But don't pray with the idea that God is a vending machine that you put in your prayer like a coin in the vending machine, push the button, and out comes a Cadillac. I, you can see my age because I still come out with the example of a Cadillac, because when I was a kid, that was the luxury car, was a Cadillac. Nobody thinks so much of Cadillacs anymore, but so don't think in terms of specific outcomes. But if it's sickness for someone that you love, then certainly you're free to pray for. Look at Holy Mother. Look at Ramakrishna. Ramakrishna prayed for the healing of Keshab. It didn't happen, even with Ramakrishna. He prayed, "Oh Mother, if you will cure Keshab, I will offer coconut and sugar candy to you." So he prayed for the healing of Keshab Chandra Sen because he loved him so much. Holy Mother prayed for the healing of Sri Ramakrishna. That didn't happen either, but she prayed for it. So Vedanta and neither Vedanta nor Sri Ramakrishna give us suicidal advice. No, if there's someone who's suffering, you're watching their suffering, certainly you can pray for them, but always recognize that God's will is going to prevail in the end. But if it's possible in your vision, O Lord, please bring healing to this person.
Swami, what are the consequences if we do not keep our prayer open to surrender, but insist? There is an element of karma that is attached to misfortune. So where does that karma go?
That's a very good point, and that's an important, and it's a good answer I'm going to give, in the sense that once we understand it and incorporate it into our thinking, it's very helpful, but it's a little disturbing to hear before you've had a chance to think about it and so forth. And that is, if you pray and insist on a particular outcome, you may get it. You may get it as a result of your prayer, not just because of 50-50 chance you're going to get it or not get it, and so you might get it. No, it may come as a result of your prayer. But as one of our great Swamis, Swami Atmarupananda, used to say, God marks it down figuratively, of course, marks it down in his ledger, gave them wealth this time, next time they will experience poverty. Gave them healing this time, next time they will experience sickness. So again, that doesn't undo what I said about healing for wellness, because again, if you do it with the understanding that eventually God's will is going to prevail. But in my limited view, if they could have healing, it would be wonderful. And if it be God's will, you please grant them, and at least grant them comfort. But don't pray for specific things. If you listen to New Age teachers, many New Age teachers, like there was a movie, what was the name of that? I forget the name of this movie that was popular, not a Hollywood production, but a video that was popular about praying for specific things. New Age teachers tell you when you pray, you have to be very specific. I want a house that is just like this. I want a spouse that is just like this, with curly hair and 5'8" and 100 and so many pounds and so forth. No, don't do that. That's yes, you may get what you pray for, but God will write down in your ledger, got it this time. Next time they will be deprived because of karma. You can't treat God as a vending machine without it being a karmic, bringing karma to you. And so the good things that you get from prayer, you're going to suffer the other side at some time, because you have gotten it freely by abusing the position of God. Not from love, not because you loved God so much, but because you loved things so much.
Swami, the movie is The Secret. Your fans have just come through.
Yes, that's it.
There's another very heartfelt question here. I had to make a choice of having my mom be placed on a ventilator or not. I did not want more suffering for her and chose not to. I often struggle with the choice and wonder if this was God's will.
Yes, yes, that's a very difficult situation. And so, in a situation like that, none of us, not even the doctor may claim to know, but none of us knows, including the doctor, what really is going to be best in a situation like that. So, in a situation where you've informed yourself as you can, none of us have total information, even total information of what's available, what to speak of a larger view of the picture. You have to make a choice in a situation like that. You're either putting her on a ventilator or not putting her on a ventilator. And some information tells you that that the ventilator is a good choice. Other information tells you it's a bad choice. You just have to pray, ask God's guidance, make the choice with a prayer, and leave it to God. And don't beat yourself up about it, because there's nothing else you can do. If it turns out that your mother were to pass away because of that, and the doctor tells you if we had put her on a ventilator she would have lived, no, even the doctor doesn't know that, and you don't know that. Maybe so, maybe not, but you can't beat yourself up over that. All you can do in such terrible situations where you feel that life is putting into your hands the choice of life and death, all you can do is the best you can. Leave it to God. It's not up to you anyway. All you can do is to be sincere and leave it to God, and leave the results to God also.
Swami, you've been talking about surrender, but there is one question here. What is the most effective way to reduce the sway of the ego in order to surrender?
Yes, there's not the most effective way, because that will depend on the person. But let me just very briefly, because I realize my answers tend to be lectures in themselves, that to reduce the ego, service of others, learning to be a good person, that is, wishing well to others, not causing harm to others. That makes that hard shell of ego, which we are all encased within, it begins to make it permeable. It begins to expand our sense of self, so that I'm not just concerned about this, but about others. So service, learning to wish well to others, being a good moral person, but not just from a self-righteous standpoint, but from the standpoint of really recognizing that good is good, and I want to be good. I want to help others. Praying to God, meditating on God, because God is the vast, and God expands our sense of the self, purifies our sense of self. So in all of those ways, we can minimize or we can begin to break down the hard shell of egotism. And that can be done through the path of knowledge also. That should be the effect of the path of knowledge. If we are growing spiritually, there's certain signs. One is that the hard shell of egotism becomes more permeable, softer, and eventually disappears at the high level. But even now it begins to soften. We become compassionate towards others. We become more ready to put ourselves out for others, not as busybodies, but in the sense of quiet, unpretentious helping of others.
Swami, another question here. Sri Krishna tells Arjuna about complete surrender at the very end in chapter 18, not before. Why so?
Because of what I quoted at the beginning. Swami Turiyananda says that surrender is the last word in spiritual life. We can take it up as a practice from the beginning if it appeals to us, and to many it does. Ramanuja teaches the path of prapatti, of surrender from the beginning. But that is a practice, and as a practice, it is work. There's nothing so hard as surrendering. Actual surrender means giving up all initiative, giving up all effort, and surrendering into the divine. But to get there, practicing surrender means at every moment, like Girish Chandra Ghosh, who surrendered to Sri Ramakrishna, he found that I can't even breathe without thinking that, is this Sri Ramakrishna's will? How can I even take a breath without seeing that, without thinking that if Sri Ramakrishna allows me, I will breathe. So of course that was an extreme example, but real surrender takes great work. So actual surrender happens at the end, even if we make it our path from the beginning.
One last question here. In a simple way, can we say the first documented panic attack was of Arjuna and the first counselor is Sri Krishna? Can we take comfort that panic attacks are solvable and in extension, all human conditions can be solved?
Yes, certainly. Now, you could probably go back into the Vedas and find evidence of a panic attack before Arjuna, but the point, of course, is not that. Your point is good, and so yes, as far as I know right now, Arjuna is the first panic attack, documented panic attack, and yes, all human problems are solvable. Some are difficult. Some are the result of lifetimes of going in a certain direction, and so they take more time to undo. But every human problem is solvable. Every human problem is solvable. And so we should take comfort in that idea and to know that certain problems, because of their complexity and their difficulty, I may need to get someone to help me with it, a professional if needs be, or a guru or someone outside of myself who can help me see through it. A professional psychologist or a social worker or a guru or someone, but all problems can be worked through in time. And even in that, when we don't know what to do with the problem and we don't know who to go to, we can always go to God. Always go to God.
Swami, thank you. That was beautiful.